Okay, this video is a book review. Here is the book called Why We Sleep, Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams by Matthew Walker. This is Matthew Walker. He's a PhD professor over at University of California, Berkeley. He's worked at other places like Harvard and Oxford, and he's a very good sleep expert. Okay, so let's take a look at what he has to say in his book here. One thing that was interesting, he showed this diagram of a research study trying to figure out the amount of brain toxicity from some of these chemicals in spiders. So here's a normal spider web. Here's a spider web when the spider has been given, it's a regular house spider, given marijuana, and you can see it can't make a web very well. When you give it benzodrine, which is a type of amphetamine, the web gets even worse, less formed, less, normal web is laminated, circumferential, outward radiating circles. It's well organized. You can look at it. It would be effective in catching a fly. Okay, the amphetamine web is becoming worse and worse. The caffeine web is basically a disaster. It looks like some abstract art, bogus stained glass window. And then chloral hydrate, that's a sedative, like the Mickey Finn to sedate somebody. Okay, it's even bigger, incapacitate somebody, it's even bigger disaster. So the point of this picture is caffeine is a major neurotoxin to the brain, okay? Look what a disaster marijuana was, and caffeine's much worse, all right? So I just tell you that because the vast majority of people think caffeine is good for them, good for the brain. No, it elevates the same hormones as psychological stress and sleep deprivation, which is cortisol and catecholamines. The cortisol causes hyperlipidemia, means fills your blood with fat, increasing your risk of diabetes and hypertension. The catecholamines stimulate the heart to pump harder, faster, so that also drives up your blood pressure. They cause hyperglycemia, so they cause more diabetes and hypertension. And they make the blood more prothrombotic, so your blood's atherogenic, prothrombotic, diabetogenic. It's a disaster, okay? You also pee out more magnesium, so you can become magnesium deficient. That's all bad. When you sleep less, then you get all the problems of lack of sleep. Cortisol also suppresses your immune system. So caffeine not only stimulates your brain, it simultaneously drops blood flow to the brain about in the ballpark of 20%. Some papers say more, some say less. Bad combination, increasing brain metabolic activity while dropping brain blood flow. Okay, we're going to talk about that some more. So anyways, getting into his book here, he says that adults, middle-aged and older, should probably sleep on average about 7 to 9 hours per night. He says that he himself goes to bed, gives himself an 8-hour sleep opportunity. So sleep opportunity means the amount of time you spend in bed. Like if you have to wake up at 6 a.m. to go to bed at 10 p.m., we give yourself an 8-hour sleep opportunity. Okay, then there's the amount of time you actually sleep while you're in bed. Okay, and so you basically divide the total time versus the amount you actually slept to figure out your sleep efficiency. In a perfect world, that would be 100%. Realistically, you're doing pretty well if you're like over 80%. So we just talked about sleep deprivation being the same thing as caffeine and psychological stress. And it increases all these diseases. It increases, like I said, hypertension, obesity, diabetes, coronary artery disease. Because it suppresses your immune system, it increases your risk of cancer and of infection. I have this little blepharitis in my eye, and if I'm really sleep deprived, like I'm just working too much, I'll sometimes get a recurrent eye infection. Okay, so it's almost like when my immune system is weak, I'm more prone to getting that infection. You become more impulsive. There's more car crashes. You have worse memory, worse ability to think. The shorter your sleep, the shorter your lifespan. That's interesting. He also made the point during daylight savings time when you lose an hour on your sleep. He says right after that, for a brief interval, there's a 20% increase in heart attacks and car crashes. Okay, because people are sleep deprived. So one quote that I made. This is my quote just from reading this. I'm like, gosh, once you realize all this. Caffeine, sleep deprivation, psychological stress, altogether, they're one of the chronic Western diseases, except they're one that you can't cure with a low-fat vegan diet alone and water filtration alone. Those will help. Okay, the Spartan vegan diet says no caffeine. All right, some interesting things about sleep. He says basically when you initially form a memory, it primarily goes to your hippocampus, the site of initial storage for declarative memory. Think of your hippocampus. It's located right adjacent to the temporal horn as part of the medial temporal lobe. It's basically like having a thumb drive in your brain. It's a small capacity memory storage, temporary memory storage device. And he says what happens at night, the first part of your night, when you sleep, you go through these 90-wave sleep cycles. The first part of your sleep is primarily deep wave sleep. You go from light sleep, awake, to light sleep, to deep sleep. And the deep sleep is the main part of your initial sleep wave cycle. And that's also called slow wave sleep, deep wave sleep, restorative. It's the most restorative sleep, meaning you feel best. So if you only slept the first 3 hours of the night, you would feel better than if you only slept the last 3 hours of the night. Towards the morning waking hours, the latest it gets into the night, the more you have REM sleep, which is so-called dream sleep. Your eyes move. REM means rapid eye movement. Deep sleep is also called non-REM sleep. Okay, so the point of the matter is you want to try to get to bed earlier so you get more of this deep sleep. And in a perfect world, like he says, try to give yourself time for at least 8 hours a night of sleep. Do I always do that? No. I'm working towards it. Okay, I try to give myself a 7-hour sleep opportunity every night. I don't always even get that, but that's what I aim for. He says if you find yourself falling asleep the next day while you're at work, that's a sign you didn't get enough sleep the night before, obviously. Okay, and then here's what's interesting too. So he says during the initial phase of sleep, the deep wave sleep, what's primarily happening is he describes it as the hippocampal initial memory storages are being pushed to the rest of the brain. If the hippocampus is like a thumb drive, the cerebral cortex is like a hard drive for long-term storage of those memories. So it's almost like a one-way passage of information from the hippocampus to the cerebral cortex. That's deep wave sleep. Then later in the evening, you get more and more REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, dream sleep. And he says your dreams are part of the brain's taking this new information from the hippocampus and integrating it with your stored memories to make it more retrievable to you the next day, to make it part of your automatic long-term storage memory response system. Okay, and you have to filter the memory because you don't want to remember everything from the daytime. A lot of stuff is trivial. So you don't want to remember that. You know, like today I walked for 6 miles, okay? I don't need to remember every step that I took, but I do need to remember the book that I was reading, okay? I just read another book about sleep. I'm interested in sleep at the moment. All right, so anyways, REM sleep helps you to integrate that with your past experience. And he also talked about a piano player. And what the piano player says is they could be working all day on playing a piano piece. And no matter how hard they try, they can never play it smoothly. They always have a little hitch, a little extra pause more than they should at one part that was difficult for them. But they said that, you know, they told Walker, you know, gee, the next day, it's as if I sit down at the piano and now my brain has learned how to play the piece and I can play it smoothly without having to pause at that difficult segment. So the brain, by running this REM sleep, in a sense, it's giving you some rehearsal practice of your experience from the day. So it makes you smarter. It makes you better at whatever you're doing and trying to learn. He talks about athletic performance, and one of the nice things I like about him is he does help coach some sports teams on how to improve their sleep to improve their athletic performance. One thing he mentioned that I thought was a little bit curious, he said athletes tend to have peak performance in the early afternoon. That's the best time to try to break an Olympic record because you'll perform best then. Okay. The brain's clock for circadian rhythm. Circa means almost or about. Dia means day. So circadian means about a day clock. And it's located in the SCN. That means suprachiasmatic nucleus. Supra means above. Chiasm is the optic chiasm. So it's right above the optic chiasm, you know, as part of the hypothalamus. And what it does is it senses the light coming through the optic chiasm, from your eye through the optic chiasm. The optic chiasm is a continuation of your optic nerves. And basically, when the light drops down, let's say below 50 lux, 30 lux, lux is a unit of light brightness, then what happens is the suprachiasmatic nucleus says, it's dark out, it's dark out, sends a signal to the pineal gland, and the pineal gland, which is located more posteriorly in the brain, okay, in the midline of the brain, at the back of the third ventricle, it starts making melatonin that's released into the blood. And the melatonin travels all over your blood and sends a signal. It's dark out, it's dark out, it's dark out. It's basically telling the body, do the things you do at night. Okay? In the day, you build up something called sleep pressure. Sleep pressure is manifested by accumulating increasing amounts of the chemical adenosine. So as soon as you wake up in the morning, you start slowly accumulating adenosine. And by evening, you've accumulated a significant amount of adenosine that just keeps on piling up the longer that you're awake. So the longer you're awake, the more adenosine you accumulate. And adenosine causes sleep pressure or sleep drive, meaning that it's telling your brain, okay, we're kind of tired, let's go to sleep. Okay, we're kind of tired, let's go to sleep. And so when the time is right, it's dark, it's late in the evening, you just go to sleep. And that's your sleep drive to sleep. And here's one thing I thought was useful and fascinating. I actually learned this from another book. I didn't learn it from Walker, but it's very useful. He said that when a person exercises, they increase their adenosine. That's a wonderful thing. So basically, if you want to sleep better, exercise more and you'll raise your adenosine even higher. Okay? I think you got to be careful not to overdo it, especially if you're new to exercising, but you'll build up your exercise capacity. Like if you like to jog, go ahead and run 1 mile the first time, 2 miles the second time, 3 miles, and gradually work up to whatever distance you want. But that will then create more adenosine, so you'll have more sleep drive. You hit the pillow, you'll sleep faster, you'll sleep deeper. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors. So caffeine's, is like a triple screw job. It's blocking your adenosine receptors. It's driving up the same hormones as stress, cortisol and catecholamines. All of that stuff is bad. The caffeine tends to have a half-life of about 6 hours, meaning that half of it's cleared out of the blood after about 6 hours. But then still you got then a half-life for the remainder of it. So even coffee you drink in the morning isn't fully cleared by evening, and that can decrease your depth and quality of your sleep. Caffeine we think of as typically in coffee and tea and energy drinks. It's also in decaf coffee, about 10% as much as regular coffee. It's in some ice creams, it's in chocolates. It's in some weight loss pill, pain relief pills. So anyways, this is part 1 of the book review. There's a lot more material in this book. I'm going to review that in a separate lecture, but this was just part 1. I hope you found that helpful. What I think was most valuable was that exercise increases adenosine, increasing your sleep drive. That's really a big deal. And deep sleep is sending the memories out from the hippocampus to the cortex primarily, and REM sleep is integrating those memories with your previous experience to make that information more usable to you. Okay, hope you found that helpful.